Well, today on RUC People, we're joined by Professor Johann Maree, who is someone who's very well known to most of us at RUC, and he's been a member here for quite some years now. So welcome, Johann. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Johann, you have a very rich and interesting story to share. We'll do our best to see what we can cover in the time we have available, but take us back to the start. Tell us a little bit about, where you were born, your very early years, and your family background.
Yes. I come from the Orange Free State, and I
Appropriately dressed for it today.
indeed. And I was born in Bloemfontein, but I lived in a little town nearby called Zille. And I grew up in that town, which was, of course, racially divided. There was the white community was predominantly Afrikaans speaking. There were about 2 or 3 English-speaking families, and my father was an Afrikaner, Afrikaans speaking. But when he studied medicine at Edinburgh in Scotland, he met my mother, who was English, not Scottish, and married her there and brought her out to Dealsville. So I had this, because my mother was English, I never identified with narrow Afrikaner nationalism. I always thought, but my mother, and so, but nonetheless, I went to school there, and they say it takes a village to raise a child. I was very influenced by my school and my community, and I grew up effectively as a Dutch Reformed, in a Dutch Reformed church. I did all the stuff that they did. But my mother insisted. She said, "You're going to be baptized Anglican and you're going to be confirmed Anglican." So there was I'm a sort of Anglo-Afrikaner, which is not that usual. Of course, it was a completely racist community, and to such extent that I, growing up in that, I just thought, well, this is normal. This is how the relationships work. Like, my father had a waiting room in the front for the white patients, and he would always first see them, and the blacks had to wait around the back. And when he finished with all the whites, then he would see the black patients. And I just assumed, well, this is life, and I didn't even know the word racist existed. And what is maybe interesting is what happened after that, if you want to pursue that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess you actually played quite a role in addressing racism over time, and maybe was some of that shaped in those early years, would you say?
Yes. What happened was, when I matriculated, I felt I'd now been enough in this narrow Afrikaans community, and I wanted to go to an English-speaking university. So I, with my parents' consent in the end, I went to Rhodes University. And I think what was a life-changing experience was I joined the Student Christian Association, and then they said after a month or so, we're going to meet fellow Christians at Fort Hare University, the Black University. Would you like to come along? And I thought, yeah, that would be interesting to meet fellow Christians. And I get there, and I start speaking to some of the people there, and they're from Kimberley, which is also not far from Dealsville. And they said, where are you from? And I said, Dealsville. And they said, oh, we have a student from Dealsville here. I said, that's not possible because they've only got up to primary school in Dealsville. No, they said, wait. And they went along, and they came back with Jacob Mahotsi. And I asked him, where are you from? Dealsville, he said. I said, how on earth did you get to Fort Hare? He said, well, I was very clever, and my parents sent me to Kimberley High School, and I'm at Fort Hare. And then I said, well, who was your father? And he said, that was Jake's. And you know what, Jake's? He had a donkey cart that he drove around in town, and I didn't know his surname, I knew nothing else about him. That's so typical. And lo and behold, the next holiday, I'm in Dealsville, and I'm in the street near the shopping area, and who should come down the street but Jacob Mahotsi from Fort Hare University. Now, it's undone to socialize with blacks, but I thought, now what do I do? But I'm very glad to say I shook hands with him, we greeted. I then invited him for tea around, and that in a sense was a life-changing experience for me, because then I became aware of my racism, and how to overcome it. And my direction at Rhodes kind of from wanting to become a nuclear physicist, I got into student politics and NUSAS, the National Union of South African Students, with the aim of fighting racism and opposing racism. So that was where the first transformation in my life happened, was at Rhodes University. Yeah.
And what were you studying at Rhodes University?
I had a very good physical science and maths teacher at school, and I wanted to become a nuclear physicist. So I did physics and mathematics as my major. But by the time I majored, I discovered I knew enough to see, and we'd done a bit of relativity theory and Einstein. I knew enough to see that nuclear physics is really just theoretical mathematics. So I thought, no, I'll first continue with maths and then I'll switch back into physics later. So I did an honors degree in postgrad, honors degree in mathematics. But now by this stage, I've been pulled into student politics a bit, and I was going to come back to do masters, but that didn't work out. So I ended up on the Student Representative Council as the chairperson of the National Union of South African Students, the NUSAS committee there.
Wow.
And then I thought, how can I become more effective? Because this is not, my maths and physics is not really going to help me. And a friend and I, he was the president of SRC, we both said, wouldn't it be great to study philosophy, politics, and economics at Oxford? That would really prepare us for change. And lo and behold, we both got scholarships to go to Oxford.
Wow.
And then I went to Oxford studying philosophy, politics, and economics.
And how old were you at the time?
Sorry?
How old were you at the time?
When I got to started studying at Oxford in 1968, and I was 25 then.
Right, okay.
25.
So for how long were you in Oxford?
I did a 3-year degree, but my principal at my college, Mansfield College, which was a congregational college, he said, you've got a degree, you need only take 2 years. So I really worked very hard to get my BA degree in philosophy, politics, and economics in 2 years.
Wow. And was that quite an adjustment for, the Free State boy having 2 years in Oxford? Your horizons must have been broadened.
Well, at Rhodes I became a liberal, non-racialist, anti-racist, but not in this sense, but wanting to, opposing all forms of racism. At Oxford, 1968 was also the year of the student worker uprising, in France, and Marxism was the in thing. So at Oxford, I became a Marxist. I was going another, and socialist orientation. The answer was, I never became a communist or Communist Party member, but I was Marxist, very convinced about the whole Marxist theoretical framework. So that was a very big change at Oxford. And when I finished there, I thought, I don't feel competent to do anything yet. So I managed to extend my scholarship to go to Sussex University to do a master's in development economics, because I thought development economics, now, because of my maths background, I should pursue economics. So I then did my master's degree in development economics at Sussex University.
In Brighton or Hove or somewhere?
Sorry?
Whereabouts in Sussex?
Sussex University is just outside Brighton. Yeah, it's just outside Brighton. It's in Hove, is where it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
And then, so it's a lot of studying, Johann. There come a point where you needed to get a job and earn a living.
Exactly. In fact, while doing the masters, I started applying for jobs. I thought, now this is really the time to do it. And then I did the masters, but I had a very big stumbling block. I could not cope with my thesis, my dissertation. My supervisor disappeared at the critical time with a lot of books. He'd gone to the Lake District, and I became anxious and panicked, and I went into a deep depression. And I ended up, in the end, they just put me on a plane and said, go home. Unfortunately, I could complete my master's the following year. They allowed me to do it
From distance.
But the story is I got back to deals when I'd lost the jobs I'd been offered because I was just depressed and I couldn't do anything. Then when I came out of the depression, I thought, now I want to work. And I couldn't find a job, but someone said, what about the University of Orange Free State? And I thought, but politically, I am so far divided, but nonetheless, I didn't have a job, so I go there. I speak to the professor of economics. He asked me a number of questions. He then runs off to what they have a rector, not, the vice chancellor, and says, I found an answer to a prayer. He says, this man has got all the qualifications I need, and we've got this vacancy. And then zoop, 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 I was appointed for 1 year as a temporary lecturer in economics. And because of my economics background, my mathematical, statistical, they especially heralded my econometric ability, statistical economics, you see. So there I am now teaching, but I hardly started there when people from Dealsville, my hometown, came and said, do you know you've appointed this radical? Do you know that?
Wow.
And something I done while at Oxford was when the all-white rugby Springboks came to play, I demonstrated against them. And that was at Twickenham, and that was where Peter Hain made his fame by getting over the fence and onto the field and thrown out. I was at the same game trying to do the same thing. And they said, this man demonstrated against the Springboks. So he calls me in, the rector. And he says to me, the first thing he says to me, you must resign. It's the first thing he tells me. I said, why? He said, your presence at this university is towards the students. You must go. Because I was now this danger in this heart of this conservative. So I said, no, I'm just teaching economics. No. And I thought I was winning the battle. My professor defended me very strongly. And then the newspapers got hold of it. The ex-demo is now Free State lecturer was the headlines in this front page story. Next day, I'm fired. They fire me. Here I sit again without a job. But fortunately, I had South African Outlook was a very sort of Christian magazine for a long time. It's stopped now. But I knew the editor, Francis Wilson, because I'd written an article for it while I was at Oxford. I phoned Francis. I said, there's something at UCT for me. He said, as it happens, a junior lecturer has just left suddenly for England. There's this vacancy. Well, I'm into the vacant. I'm now a temporary junior lecturer in economics at the University of Cape Town.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's what brought you to here.
That's what brought me. That's how I came to Cape Town.
And you've been here ever since?
I was here ever since. I'm a lecturer in economics, but I'd say, what else do I do to now change South Africa? How do we get, and I'm in favor of peaceful change. I was not going to do a revolution in violence. And I thought, black workers, let's strengthen black workers, and especially in Cape Town, they were at that time unionists, migrant laborers mostly, not allowed to have their families. So I thought I'm going to start a union. And I discovered the new SAS students were starting, and I joined up with them. And we started a union, which we call the Western Province General Workers Union. And I found myself reading more books on industrial sociology than in economics, because I was now interested in trade unions, on management, labor relations, on conflict resolution, all that. And the head of department of economics was very conservative, and he kept trying to block me. Because I was even teaching Marxian economics at that stage. I managed to get a course in where I was teaching Marxian economics. And I thought, wow, I would really love to teach industrial sociology. That's really, because that's now, then I can really train people to become trade unionists. And lo and behold, the vacancy arises to take charge of the whole industrial sociology program, which was just being started up. And I applied and I got it.
Wow.
So then I became senior lecturer in charge of the undergraduate and growing postgraduate industrial sociology program. And in a sense, I'd arrived home. I was in that from 1980 until I retired in 2008. So I had 28 years of running the industrial sociology program at the University of Cape Town.
Oh. And it's very exciting. Did you find that fulfilling, that you had an aspiration to bring about change, to nurture budding unionists?
That's right.
Do you feel you were able to achieve that in those 28 years?
Well, I thought I'm going to train my students here to become trade unionists, because interestingly, the group of us who started the main form of black unions, there were other unions starting as well, were all white leftist students from Wits, from Durban, and from Cape Town. I felt whites, there's a role for whites in a black union. I thought, at that stage, it was mainly white, it was almost exclusively white, almost the white students. I thought, I'm going to train them to become trade unionists so they can get to the unions. Then I soon discovered that a lot of them will want to become human resource managers. And I thought, but that's not bad. I'm going to make them sympathetic to unions and relationships with workers and negotiate and help them improve their working lives. So I felt okay with that. In fact, one year I trained at honours two of the students there. Next year, they were negotiating. The one was working for a union, the one was working for a company, and there they were negotiating with each other. Yeah. And I thought, I've arrived. This is what I want, you see. So, yes.
So, Johann, you also mentioned your depression. This was
yes.
sort of an episode that came upon you very heavily, when you were in Sussex, completing your masters.
Yes.
Is this something that you've battled with throughout your life, and how did you manage to deal with it then, and maybe if it been recurring episodes?
Yes. That's a very good question. It's interesting. I grew up very confidently in my hometown. I went to Rhodes University, went along, and interestingly, the year I was finally now SRC, and I was doing an education diploma just to be at the university. I got into my first depression, and a major depression. I didn't really know what was happening.
Was it something that was triggered by circumstances, or is it like a medical condition? It just comes upon you for no particular reason?
For me, that one and the second one that I mentioned at Sussex, they were both caused by anxiety. I couldn't cope. I kept being pulling out to go and teach at a school for teachers going on leave, and at the equivalent of bishops at Rhodes and Andrews, I couldn't cope with something I was meant to teach to the A levels. We only did the third year at university, and I didn't understand, and I got so anxious about it. Believe it or not, I got into a depression, and I went down. And I didn't know what was happening. I just knew I can't cope anymore. I had a psychology friend who fortunately saw what was going on, and he got me to the mental hospital there called Fort England.
Okay.
And I received electric shock therapy there. And I must say, after the first time, I thought I'm going to feel all the shocks. I resisted, and they kind of dragged me almost, drugged me. And then I discovered when I woke up from it, I didn't feel anything. I just heard buzzes, and then I passed out. And I actually felt a bit better. So I thought, no, okay, I'm all right with this. But so my first depression was at Rhodes University. I got over it. I got, for a temporary thing, before going to Oxford, I worked in Johannesburg for a year and I managed to get a job for a year. And then at Sussex, Oxford went all right, Sussex, anxiety, depression. When I got now to Cape Town, I thought, I really must understand what's happening to me. And I asked around for a good therapist, and I think I was very fortunate. I got a Jungian analyst who was also an Anglican priest.
Okay.
So, and this was the first time I discovered Jung. And of course, Jung believed in the unconscious and the archetypes, and one of the archetypes is sort of God archetype, and there's all an evil archetype. So the first time I started seeing how inside a person is the ability to be godlike or the ability to be evil-like, and that it depends on, and one's got to integrate. For Jungian analysis, the self arrives when the unconscious and the conscious are in communication and in harmony with each other. And so I married religion and psychology through my therapy. And it's been very, very valuable to me. Then, so that's now, that depression I had was in 1971. And with the therapy, I thought I've solved it. And for up to 1998, I didn't get a depression. Then I went into another depression, and this time it's not so clear what caused it, but I know that that year was a terribly difficult year for me. The university had introduced what it called programs, which is a structured, career-oriented degree. And I really battled. No one wanted to come in with me to form a program that would have this training of industrial, trade unionists and industrial sociology. But I fought and I finally got a program going, but I think that exhausted me and got me down. So I had another very deep depression in 1998. Now, what's also interesting, I went, this time a psychiatrist treated me. And I asked him, what approach do you use? And he said, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. Again, I never heard of it, but I quickly got in books and I read about it. And I found it very, very useful since then to use cognitive behavioral therapy if I'm feeling downish.
Okay.
But if I may just continue with that,
yeah.
I sometimes felt I'm dipping into depression. So I went and spoke to my psychiatrist, and he said, look, take a light dose of antidepressant just to make sure you're above the depression level. So I did, and I thought, especially with Helen as mayor and then as premier, she can't afford to have a depressed husband, so I better stay at a healthy psychological, personal level. And then about a year ago, through my religious development, which is something, I came to the conclusion that if I really always only do what pleases God, and I will never feel guilty about or ashamed of, because when I recovered from all my depressions, I was so ashamed of what I'd done. And I was so guilty, I felt so guilty. So I thought, if I can never feel guilt or anxiety about what I'm doing, and the way to know that is to make sure that I'm always doing God's will to the best of my ability, I will never feel guilt and shame. So I thought, okay, I'm giving up the antidepressants. Some people tell me, you're stupid to do it. I said, now my faith is helping in my life. About 6 months ago, I stopped taking my antidepressant, and I've not been depressed at all. I'm spiritually in a very good, personally in a very good space.
Cool. So Johann, you touched on Helen just earlier, and we haven't sort of talked about your, that this is your long-term wife, and for those who don't know, Helen Zille is a very prominent person in South Africa. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? How you met, and what it's meant for you being the partner of someone who's been a very public figure. As you've been going at your own career and your own struggles.
How we met is the remarkable role that chance plays in your life also. How it was, because I was at a farewell for the Norwegian vice consul, and we were talking about why Alistair Sparks, the editor of the Rand Daily Mail, which was the one radical newspaper, why he was fired. And I'd heard, and I said a story why, and I said, oh, Helen Zille says this, and this is why he was fired. Because someone had told me this is what Helen Zille, and she was a very prominent journalist already, because she broke the Steve Biko story, that Biko did not die from a hunger strike, he died from being physically assaulted. And he said, oh, she's here this evening, did you know? He said, just wait a moment. He ran off. he came back with my future wife. Now that's what you would call synchronicity, just sheer chance event. And the man she was with there wasn't a boyfriend. And apparently she was so impressed by me, I'm pleased to say. On the way back, she said, "Who's this Johann Maree?" And he said, oh, don't you know him? He's, UCT, and he's coming to supper at my place tomorrow night. Would you like to come? She said, yes, I'd like to come. and so, and he hinted at me, and I was, single and looking. And I was just very impressed by Helen from the start. I could see she was a very deep person and a very intelligent person, and also, strong. I could not realizing everything that I was going to marry. You see, so we get married, and I suppose at some point she says, "Look, I think I want to get into politics," because she'd done a very big educational court case when she was the chair of the Board of Governors of Grove Primary School. And so Tony Leon said, "Won't you come and join the party and then for Parliament, for provincial government first time, and then we're going to make a deal with a national party then, and you'll become Minister of Education because you." And lo and behold, she just got in. She became Minister of Education for Provincial Minister of Education. But then municipal elections came along, and they said, "Helen, if you stand as mayor, we stand a chance of getting in." Now, once again, but this one was really close. When the election results come in, there's something like 402 councillors. And when they vote for the chair, that's already an indication of now the chair gets the DA's representative gets in by one vote, 201 to 200.
Wow.
And now comes the mayor, and of course Helen gets proposed as the mayor, and someone else is proposed as the mayor. And they count and they recount and they recount. And there was one abstention. She'd gone to see a lot of people. A PAC man, he said, "I'm going to abstain. I'm not going to vote for the ANC." She said, "If you abstain, I'll get in." Helen gets in by also like 201 to 200 as mayor.
So what did that mean for you, being...
Well, that's what it meant for me is she then was not only mayor, she won the Mayor of the World competition, and became premier later on. And the first thing is being married to a person who then becomes so influential it's very informative and interesting. I see an inside track of what's happening inside the politics. The other really interesting feature is that one meets people one would never meet otherwise. I met Nelson Mandela through Helen and F.W. de Klerk through Helen, but the most famous one was Angela Merkel, and who came for the World Cup soccer, and then after the game came for supper at our place. And then she said, "Oh, I want to see the other quarterfinal to see who Germany is going to play against." So off we went to the TV room, sat there with Angela Merkel watching TV. But I think the really important thing is Helen is terribly busy and away a lot of the time. And I could be lonely, but I've just decided I must have my own career. And I must build up my own life also, separate from Helen. So I have my own career and direction and issues I'm involved in. And I think my religion also helps me not to feel lonely, but solitude. I enjoy solitude, I can be alone, as it were, in God's presence also.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Johann, your connection with RUC, you've been part of this community for quite some time now. How did that come about, and what is it that draws you to RUC? All right,
I'll just quickly deals with Dutch Reformed Church, but I go to Rhodes, and I'm now going to be an Anglican. So I go to the Anglican, and I now build up my Anglican career. Then that first job I got in Johannesburg, I go to St. Mary's Cathedral, and I get quite involved in St. Mary's to the point that I get elected onto the church council. Within a year, I'm a very young church counsellor, and very much building on my Anglican side. I really felt I wanted to build up on that side. When I come back and I land in Cape Town, I get asked onto the Board of Social Responsibility of the Anglican Church. Social issues. I remember we were very concerned about domestic wages, and we took it up as a church issue with the Anglican Church. Then two things happen. The one is the Archbishop doesn't want to reappoint me onto the board because I think he thinks I'm too radical. And the other thing is I'm terribly impressed by the Quakers. About 30 of them, and they're doing such enormous social change. And with that combination, I thought, okay, Anglicans, you don't really want me, and I'm very keen on the Quakers. So off I go, and I join Friends, the Quakers here in Maree, you know, and I become clerk of Quakers in my. Wow. So I become clerk of Quakers. But then, what is quite, you know, Quaker service is an hour silence, and you only speak if you feel the Spirit moves you to speak. And our children were now starting to grow up, and it just wasn't a suitable way for them to learn about religion. Is, you know, sit there in silence, you know. And so we were told Rondebosch, it was in Rondebosch congregation, or Rondcon, has got very good Sunday schools and children's services. So they weren't really doing really well with the children. They couldn't really cope with. And so we were told Rondcon. So we came, I suppose, primarily for the sake of our children. But secondly, we knew it was a sort of intellectual and open church. And I felt, yes, and I really, Doug Bax, you know, I really felt close and harmonized with him. So that was really what got us to church here. As a little bit of interest after our boys go to Sunday school and so on, and then suddenly one day Paul comes home and says, I'm an atheist, he says. And Thomas says, I'm an agnostic. But and they no longer come to church, but I was now really attached. And so my main involvement has been with the house church. Yes. My main involvement has been with the house church.
Which has been running for some time now.
It's been running, I think it's in its 13th year now. And when Rob Robertson, he left it, I'm not officially the leader, but practically I am.
And I understand you cover the wide range of topics and books over the years.
Yes,
tell us a little bit about what you've done there.
Yes, I always understood, and I'm not sure Rob had the same idea, that it was really going to be how does one interpret and understand your faith in a secular society? And I think that's always been the goals. But one of the things that I ran a course for about over a year, this course is maybe the wrong word, but it became a course at University of Cape Town Summer School, is the role of religion and psychology, how they integrate in helping a person grow into wholeness. So we gradually worked our way through, mainly as a psychologist, through Carl Jung, through Erich Fromm, through Scott Peck, we also did William James, because he was the first one who really researched psychology from religion, from an empirical psychological point of view. So we worked our way through that a lot, and then I offered it as a summer school course. For 5 nights it ran on religion and psychology in the role of creating personal wholeness. But we ranged very widely. For a while we focused on science and religion. You know, how do you integrate those two? And I've always felt very strongly, I don't want to have two paradigms, 2 points of view. One is what I know about the universe and the world and evolution, and that human species evolved, and the other is the sort of biblical and other traditional religions, complete paradigms that are just not. And I'm not going to hold these two.
You need to try and integrate them.
I want to integrate it, and so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Johann, not a young man anymore, and I wonder, is retirement a myth? What does life hold for you now? Is there ever going to be such a thing as Johann not working? And how do you see the next few years? With Helen seemingly as busy as ever, and you now have grandchildren. What does life hold for you in the next few years?
Yes, that's a good question. I can remember John DeGruchy, who retired before me. He said, life on the other side of retirement is very busy. He said, you're very busy because you retire. I don't think you're not going to be busy. That was the first thing. A colleague of mine from Wits, who did similar things to me, he says, when you retire, you're actually starting your new career. and it is quite true. I find I don't seek joy, and I find meaning doing things that are meaningful to me. And for me, meaningful is I'm promoting the good of humanity, or nowadays of the world, also going green, and making sure, and society as a whole. So I'm still driven by wanting to do contributions like that, also, I mean, I must work to my strengths, or where my areas of interest are. So I'm still doing quite a lot of work in my main field, is in employment relations. And I was asked, I'm very pleased to say, I was asked to write a chapter on employment relations in South Africa for what is the best book in the world on international and comparative employment relations. And I had to find co-authors, and I was very fortunate to find Asanda Benya here at the University of Cape Town, a young black woman who's on the board. And recently, the American Labor and Employment Relations Association wanted to discuss this book. And we did it on a global level with Zoom. And the coordinator was sitting in Australia. We were here in South Africa doing it. There were some people from Germany, from Canada, and from America. Then we were conducting a Zoom discussion on this book and the chapters we have. So I'm still quite involved. The other, I'm organizing an African regional conference, or co-organizing it on this. Besides all that, the University of Western Cape picked me up after my retirement from UCT and said, won't I please mentor their PhD candidates in their Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences? And now this is my 12th year of they appoint me on an annual contract. This is the 12th year they've renewed my contract. And I mentor PhD candidates, and it's broader than that. I assist research and publication in that faculty as well.
Well, long may it continue as long as your health holds out. But you still seem in very good shape, Johann. I remember seeing you riding your bike on the promenade and all that when you go. So, great. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I think it's been fascinating to get to know you a little better. And I'm sure the other viewers would have appreciated this as well. And so thank you again.
It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for asking very good leading questions.